to Talent Without Borders, the podcast where I'll celebrate the extraordinary creativity and resilience of international students in Canada. I'm your host Juan, and in this series, I'll share the inspiring stories of students, each one bringing their unique skills, dreams, and perspective. From overcoming the challenges of migration to thriving in their fields, these individuals are proof that talent knows no boundary. Join me as we dive into authentic conversations with these passionate students, exploring their journeys, their aspirations, and the positive impact they're making. This is Talent Without Borders, where the world meets opportunity. Hi, I'm Juan, and today I'm with...
I am Fernando Bossoes.
So Fernando, it is very nice to meet you. First, I wanted to ask you, what is your background? Where do you come from? And why did you choose to come to Canada?
It's nice to meet you. I was born and raised in Brazil. Uh, Lived there 18 years of my life. And when I graduated from high school, I came to Canada. So this was almost 3 years ago. It was in April 2022. If you ask me why I came to Canada, well, my cousin was the one who always encouraged me to not do like post-secondary abroad, but like just do a program abroad. No, even if it's like only 2 months, 3 months, because she studied in Wisconsin in the U.S. And then when COVID hit, I was in high school, and we weren't doing much, and I was like, well, let me see if this interests me anyhow, and well, it did, and I've been here for 3 years now.
And what was your first thought about Canada? What appealed to you about the country to come here?
It's funny because a lot of people ask me that, and I think a lot of people have like those answers like, oh, like I've always loved Canada, or there's always this goal that I had. For me, it was just like I had a bunch of options. I was thinking of going to the US, going to the UK, going to Canada. I have family in the UK and I have family in the US, and I don't have anyone here. So I think if I went to the US or to the UK, the experience would not be the same. When you're by yourself in a new country where you have to take care of your own, you have to take care of responsibilities, I think the experience is much better and beneficial for you. So I think that's one of the reasons why I chose to come here.
And this is a country with a lot of international students from all over the world. So once you were here, what were your first thoughts about the country?
It's interesting because I didn't know that. The only thing I knew about Canada was very cold. I was born in Brazil, so what was cold for me was always like 24 degrees. That's super cold. So the only thing that I knew about Canada, it would be very cold. And when I first got here, I remember when I went to downtown Toronto for the first time, and English was not the language I would be listening to. I would walk downtown, would hear Spanish, I would hear Arabic, I would hear Portuguese, a lot of Italian as well, but I didn't really listen to a lot of English. So that kind of surprised me at first how diverse, especially Toronto, not only Canada, but like Toronto, how diverse Toronto is.
And did it make you more confident? Because, you have a really good accent, but maybe for some people they are concerned because they say, oh, my English is not so good. And then you come here and you start to notice all these accents like you say. So did that help you?
Well, first of all, thank you. But I think it does. For a lot of international students, especially when you're away by yourself, you don't have your family, don't have anyone you can count on. When you first get to a country, things can be very scary. And, there are cultural difference between any country, And I think when you see people of your own, not only like in my case from Brazil, like people who I know are going through the same struggles that I am going as an international student, people who are trying to adapt to the culture, people who, are debating if their accent is good enough. I think having those people that they're going through the same thing is very good for the transition. And I think that's one of the good things about coming to Toronto.
Now that you mentioned culture, I wanted to ask you, how do you think your Brazilian culture has helped you here in Canada?
If I can tell you one of the first things that I noticed about Canada, the difference, in Brazil, I feel like people are very close to each other, like a very silly example. But like when you walk into an elevator, you usually ask how the person is doing, like how their family is doing. And here in Canada, people are very reserved, like you don't really talk to anyone in the streets, you try to stay on your own. So that was a very big difference for me because, the stereotype is true. In Brazil, like we are huggers, we like to hug a lot. And here in Canada, it's not like that. So that's a thing. That's something I really had to adapt when I first came.
Yeah, it happened to me. I don't know. I think that in my culture, it's normal for me to be on an elevator and say good morning or like have a good day. And here sometimes people don't reply. And I say to myself, okay, maybe they're not like that.
I know, yeah, and at first at first my mind was just like, oh my god, like why are they so rude, you know? But it's not about being rude. It's just the culture is different, and I think it takes some time for you to understand that. But I think it's very beneficial though to have this shock, this culture shock. Sometimes it can be very hard, but I think having this culture shock is just very it's a learning experience, and you learn a lot from it.
And being an international student, you're doing the journalism program, but besides that, you also work with Humber Hawks, which is Humber College varsity team. How has been the experience doing that?
Well, it's been amazing. It's very interesting because in the summer between my first and my second year, I remember I had already two jobs lined up for the fall, so I was not really looking for anything else. And then Humber Hawks, and to be very honest, like I didn't know anything about the varsity programs at Humber. And then they posted that they're looking for like a lot of positions in their broadcasting department. So they're like looking for journalists, looking for camera operators. And I messaged my friend. I was like, hey, look at this. Like they're looking for someone to write for them. But like I already have two jobs. I don't think I'm gonna apply to this. And my friend Tyler, he was like, well, like I don't think it hurts. Just apply, and if you don't get it, you just don't get it. But if you do end up getting it, you see what you do. And I was like, all right. So I applied. I got the interview, and I only heard back like a couple weeks before the season started. And if I have to be very honest with you, well, I grew up in Brazil, and even though I've always been a sports fan, the only sport that I always watched in my life, like very closely, and I knew like the terms and everything, was soccer. When I got the email saying I was hired, in the next week we would have to cover baseball and softball. So we have like a lot of sports that we cover. So I got assigned to write softball, and I'm gonna be very honest with you. If I look back now at that first article, I always say like this is bad, like very bad. So that was one thing. A lot of the sports, especially when you move to another country, like you don't really know the specific terms about stuff, right? So that was a very hard thing, to adapt to that environment at first. But honestly, it's just been amazing. I'm very grateful for all the opportunities that they've given me for this past few years, and it's just fun. It's just very, very fun.
And I think it's also a good opportunity for you to learn not only about the sport, but also you have the opportunity to meet new people, whether they are international students or Canadians. So that's also a good thing about the work that you do.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned about learning, because I remember, and this is I don't think I've ever told this to anyone. In my interview for the job, Brian, who is my boss now, he was like, "Well, let me ask you this: what's your knowledge of the varsity sports at Humber?" And at that point, I have watched one soccer game from the varsity programs at Humber, and I didn't want to lie. I was like, "Look, to be very honest with you, I don't know anything about the varsity programs." And I look back at it now, and Brian told me, it's okay. Like when I started working here, I didn't know anything about rugby as well. And, you're just going to pick it up. So looking back now, like just Brian gave me this opportunity to like, don't worry, like you're going to learn. I think it's very, very good and very, very nice of him as well.
Yeah, and I think they're also very mindful about that because obviously you're not from here. And even though Brazil is a very important country with sports, they understand that, okay, this might be common here, but you don't know it and you're going to pick it up as you start working.
Yeah, 100%.
I also wanted to ask you what challenges have you faced as an international student? It can be something from an academic perspective or personal.
It's a very good question. Well, I'm going to talk first about, well, it could be like academic slash professionally, because I'm in the media industry, and like we have to talk a lot, we have to be in front of the camera a lot, and I do have an accent. And when you watch the TV, like whatever it is, like CBC or TSN, Sportsnet, you only see Canadian people, right? And that's kind of intimidating at first, because I always think to myself like, am I ever gonna make it because I have an accent? Is that gonna be a challenge? And people say it's not, but it's definitely something that you always think of. And I think it's not only for in my industry. I think in any industry, a lot of international students, they consider like, am I gonna get a job because I have an accent? So that's really a challenge when it comes to academic and professional. In terms of myself, so I came here when I was 18, fresh from high school, lived with my parents my whole life, and just the little things when you start living by yourself is very hard. And I don't think it matters if you're 18 or if you're 40. When you come to when you go to a country that you don't have anyone you can count on, like just the silly things when you get sick and you cannot call your mom,
Yeah.
I think that's a hustle and that's a challenge for anyone. But putting yourself out there is the goal, and it's that's how you can win those challenges.
And it's funny because we had a grad panel for one of our classes with former MediaCom students, and I think a lot of international students, we have that concern of the language. It has happened to me. I've done some work in the sports industry, and I actually noticed that, okay, I'm the only international person here, so I can understand your concern. And how do you approach those challenges? What do you say to yourself, like, oh, I have all these skills that can help me prove people I'm valuable?
It's a very good question. I guess that's the $1 million question,
Yeah.
right? How do you get through those? Wow, you got me on the spot now. I think at the end of the day, and you probably have experienced that before. You ask people in the industry, and they always say that. At the end of the day, they say if you do a great job, you're gonna get an opportunity. It doesn't matter where you're from, if you have an accent or if you don't. At the end of the day, if you're doing your stuff, if you're putting yourself out there, if you're getting experiences, you're building your portfolio, right? So I think for me, this is a very internal thing that I always think about the way I'm talking, my accent. But at the end of the day, I just try to say yes for every opportunity. I just put myself out there. I go to get me people. I try to expand my portfolio as much as possible. And I think I'm speaking here from a media perspective, but that's from anything, right? If you're doing business, if you're doing, I don't know, architecture, just putting yourself out there, getting to meet people, and just really being open to just learn and learn from others. I think that's a big thing.
You have one more year left of your program, so far, can you talk about an achievement you're proud of since coming to Canada?
Yeah. Well, I can talk about a professional achievement. So for the Humber Hawks, my job there, I've been there for it's been over a year and a half, and I'm so grateful because I was awarded two awards already. I was awarded the Joe Caesar Memorial Media Award, which is named after this guy who was a journalism student here at Humber back in the 80s, I think, and he used to be the one covering the varsity sports. So just having that award named after him, just getting that was very, very good. And I'm a person who always thinks about my job. I'm always like doubting the stuff I'm writing, the stuff I'm producing. Like, is this good enough? Am I doing great? So that was very good. And just recently, a couple months ago, I won an award also because of my Humber Hawks position, the Jerry Howard, the voice of the Blue Jays for many years, and getting an award named by him. It just makes you feel good. I'm not a person who, does things to, just receive compliments. I'm not like that. But I think especially in my case that I really doubt my work out every single time, just getting those recognitions just feel great and very reassuring as well.
And how do your family react to that? I can only imagine how they felt when you told them that you got all these awards.
It's funny because I was just in Brazil for the holidays, so I went there for the holiday break. And my dad is very reserved. We don't really talk about stuff. And one day we were talking just about like my job and stuff, and I found out that he downloads the PDF of every single story I write. Doesn't matter if it's sports, if it's a breaking news story, if it's politics, he downloads a PDF of every single story I write. And it's just those little details about how your family react. And my mom is always like, "Oh my god, like congratulations," but I think
Classic mom.
oh yeah, 100%. Classic Latina mom. I think, and I'm the type of person that I just want to make them proud. So I think just knowing that they're happy of the person I'm becoming, I think it's great.
I think it's really important because I've been checking your work and it's nice to see someone writing these stories. Even though English is not your first language, you're basically getting to know yourself through the whole college. And I also want to talk about what advice do you give to international students who are here or want to come to Canada?
Well, one thing I'm gonna say is it's the two sides of a coin. Don't be afraid, but you are going to be afraid. Especially when you move to a country where you don't know anyone, you don't have any friends. At first you're gonna think, I'm not gonna make it. This is too much for me. Why have I decided to come here? You start asking yourself, right? But so I'm gonna say you're gonna be afraid. Doesn't matter how brave you are, you're going to be afraid at some point. It could be personally, it could be academically, it could be professionally, you're gonna be afraid. But also don't be afraid. Learn how to learn how to go through those feelings. And I think the biggest thing is don't let those feelings stop you. Don't let the feeling of you being afraid stopping you from, just putting yourself out there and trying to learn new skills and gain new experiences, because at the end of the day, fear is something that we all feel, but we can't let those feelings stop us.
Especially because even though Canada has been a very welcoming country historically, I feel that lately there has been a lot of concern from international students with all the new immigration measures. So, how do you feel about that now that you're already here and you start to read and listen to all these stories?
Yeah, bottom line is it's scary. When I first came here, there was nothing. There was like no talk about the study permit program. There was no thought about the international student program. And then I've been here for not even 3 years yet. And now I'm just like, whew, am I gonna be able to build a life here after I graduate? Am I gonna be able to achieve my dreams? Especially for me, that I'm a person who thinks about the future a lot. You just hope for the best.
And talking about the future you just mentioned, what are the main aspirations you have here in Canada? You're doing well, but thinking more about maybe when you finish the program.
Whew, that's a hell of a question. Let me maybe phrase this in a career goal, I guess. My long term career goal is to work with sports, but not really what I'm doing now. So, TSN reporter Rick Westhead is really a person that I look up to. He's the one who covered the Hockey Canada scandal. So, he really covers this other side of sports journalism, like people stories, organization scandals. Even though that's tough, I think it's a necessary job. I can write game recaps all day and talk about how a player hit a home run all day, but it doesn't really move me. I really like to tell the human side of sports journalism. I really like to go to a player and be like, like, put your home runs aside. Tell me a challenging situation you had to go through during your time at college. Those are meaningful stories. And even though it's tough for not only to tell those stories, but also to listen to those stories, are very tough for the media people as well. I think they're necessary. And I think if I had to put my long-term career goals, and I think having the opportunity to work with this side of sports journalism, which honestly I think it's not really covered in the media nowadays, I think that would be something unique.
Yeah, that would be valuable because I feel that they have a traditional system here when it comes with sports media. So it's nice that you have this approach of doing something different because that can also be kind of your trademark. People will know you for that, and I think that's great. And I know that you haven't been here for a very long time, but when you think about the Fernando that arrived to Canada and you compare it to how you are right now, what do you think has been the biggest change?
Whew. You know, and it's funny because you're asking me this, but I only been here for like not even 3 years yet, But I think the Fernando from 2.5 years ago and the Fernando now, they're two different people, like very different. I think, and we talked about this before. You asked me how you feel when you see people here who like from your country or from your culture. It feels very good, but I think if you don't put yourself in a position where you're letting yourself learn about the culture that you're in now, if you learn about Canada, learn about their customs, I think this is something very beneficial for your worldview as well. So I think the Fernando from 2.5 years ago was a Fernando fresh from high school who always had everything done for him. And now I think I'm just very more mature. And I can tell when I just go back home. I don't see my family for a year. I just usually see them once a year. So tell that the interactions are different. I just feel like I'm a different person.
Yeah, totally. This that you mentioned is a big part of moving to another country. It's not only about looking for new opportunities, but it's also a way to leave your comfort zone and to grow as a person, have new experiences, meet new people. I think that's all part of the process.
Yeah, 100%. And maybe I should even mention this here. I remember that when I first came, I kind of like stopped myself from meeting like Brazilian people from my own country. Like the Brazilian community here is very big, especially in the Dantas West area, the Brazilian slash Portuguese community. And I kind of like stop myself from, like having a lot of Brazilian friends or maybe speaking a lot of Portuguese because I really wanted to understand how life is here. Even though it is hard and it's hard for a lot of international students for, to like kind of put yourself away from the things you're used to for a little bit. Even though it's hard, I think it's very beneficial. It just really makes you get more used to the culture, more used to the customs, what like a 9 to 5 life means, So I think that's a big thing for sure. Don't get me wrong, like I'm not here saying like I'm the new Canadian in
Yeah.
town, like no, I'm Brazilian. I was born Brazilian. I'm gonna die Brazilian.
Yeah.
Like I want to go to down the street and be able to talk about Mayor Olivia Chow or the Premier Doug Ford. I think it just helps you create a sense of belonging.
So I'm really glad that you are going through this process and having this success. So Fernando, it was a pleasure for me and a nice talk with you and seeing how you're building your own career and having all the success in college. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Those are good questions. I love it.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Talent Without Borders. I hope you enjoy hearing the incredible stories of international students who are shaping their future and making a positive impact in Canada. If you're inspired by the journey, be sure to follow along with the project for more stories and insight. You can listen to the full podcast series on YouTube, and for more details, head over to the dedicated project page on my portfolio. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share it with others and spread the word about the amazing talent from all around the world. Stay connected, stay inspired, and keep supporting the creativity and aspirations of students everywhere. I'm Juan, and until next time.